What is the most random NSFW history fact that you didn't learn in school? Fath Ali Shah Qajar, second king in Qajar dynasty in Iran, about 200 years ago, had 160 wives. Nasruddin Shah Qajar had about 50. In Islam you're not allowed to marry more than 4 wives at the same time. It is said that Nasruddin Shah was once walking in his palace and saw a beautiful girl, and asked if he could marry her. Everyone was looking at him weirdly and he asked why. One of his servants said that she was his daughter. This is the modern mainstream interpretation. But it's disputed. The Quran says something like, take however many wives, 2, 3, 4. And then goes on to explain God thinks one is ideal. It seems to be the 2, 3, 4 part is more poetic in nature than a command. Especially considering the Prophet, his family, and his companions had more wives. This was also in a time when women outnumbered men 3 to 1 by low estimates, 10 to 1 by high estimates. Men died far more often in Arabia during Muhammad's time. There are little penises carved/engraved on the pavement in Pompeii, that point towards brothels. Those little dicks survived volcanic eruption, as did some NSFW paintings inside the buildings. I went to Pompeii and followed the dicks. Along the way my wife and I ran into 2 deaf tourists. One could read lips and speak clearly. Her friend was trying to say something and she was interpreting his signs. She was trying to be polite and was a little embarrassed about what they were looking for, the tile pictures in the brothels with the huge penises, so she kept using words other than brothel or whorehouse and definitely didn't say penis. Finally her companion got tired of waiting and just started pantomiming a huge dick with his hands. He was waving his arms around like the dicks were yards long and girthy. She was mortified and my wife and I almost died laughing. We told them to follow us, and we talked on our way. We all got to see the dicks together. I read that Victor Hugo slept with so many prostitutes that all the brothels in Paris were closed on the day of his death because they all took the day off to mourn his death. Catherine the Great of Russia was quite fond of sex. She had multiple lovers, many of them much younger than her. Her last lover, Prince Zubov, was 40 years younger than her. She often raised her lovers to high positions and gave them gifts. She had also Leprevers, tester of male capacity, who had sex with any potential lovers before they were allowed to spend the night with Catherine. This person was Countess Praskovia Bruce, confidant of her. Catherine had also erotic art and furniture. Legends say that she died while having sex with horse, but this is not actually the case. And as an interesting fact, her line still goes on. Her great-great-granddaughter, Olga Konstantinovna, was paternal grandmother of Prince Philip, Duke of Edinburgh. President Warren G. Harding had a 6-year-long affair with a lady named Nan Britton, who in her autobiography said that she and Harding had sex in a closet in the White House, and claimed that Harding was the father of her daughter. At the time of its publishing, the book was met with public ridicule and widely discounted as the stuff of pornographic fiction. Britton was labeled a sex pervert and degenerate, and a book was even written to counter her claims about Harding, who was married to another woman. It was confirmed in 2015 through ancestry DNA testing that the descendants of Harding and Britton were indeed related. I went to college in his hometown. This story and the one about naming his penis Jerry were my favorite ones to tell whenever I was standing near the giant portrait of him in the auditorium. His presidential portrait has always seemed strange and eerie to me. As a kid, he was always the biggest mystery to me as he was a president that died in office, nothing was ever mentioned of him in school, and that he looked like a waxen ghoul. I was surprised when I actually learned about him, especially that he was considered very handsome and was a ladies' man. During the war, the British dropped pictures of Hitler with his dick out in Germany. One of the most intriguing and insidious insults to Adolf Hitler was a propaganda postcard code-numbered H.789 produced by director Sefton Delmer of the British Political Warfare Executive, PWE, that showed the Führer with his penis in his hand. The postcard chosen to caricature was originally a product of Photo Hoffmann of Munich. Hitler stands on what appears to be a balcony with his left hand on the rail and his right hand on his waist. In the parody, his right hand is depicted holding a circumcised penis. This probably was designed to feed the rumor that Hitler was indeed a self-hating Jew. There was also a plan from the Allied forces to drop porn magazines over his bunker because they believed he was asexual and that being bombarded with nudity would drive him insane. Charles II, Charles the Impotent, was the convergence point for several generations of royal inbreeding and was born with significant disabilities. His parents were desperate for him to produce an heir. They implemented a system of ropes and pulleys to lower virgins onto him in hopes he could impregnate one. It didn't work and the dynasty collapsed. Man, instead of going to all of that trouble, you think they just cut their losses, have his wife get knocked up by a dude of similar facial features that wasn't inbred and be done with it. If you are referring to the Habsburg Charles II, his nickname was also the Bewitched. Due to the sheer amount of inbreeding, it was said that he was incredibly ugly, born with the well-known Habsburg jaw, severe underbite. He was mentally slow, epileptic, early balding, and short. Couldn't learn to talk until the age of 4, or walk until the age of 8. He had an arranged marriage, but was obviously infertile. La Palatine, Louis XIV's second sister-in-law, who had quite a temper, replied harshly to the king, slapped her son, a prince in public, loved to take shits outdoors. She wrote countless letters saying she hated Versailles because she had to shit around valets and thus could not enjoy her shit dropping. That the ancient Egyptians believed that the god Atum, after creating himself from water, created two other gods, Shu and Tefnut, to build the world either by masturbating and spitting his own semen from his mouth or having sexual intercourse with his shadow, depending on the myth. 12-year-old Pocahontas used to entertain white colonists with nude cartwheels. This is actually one of the few things we know about her that's indisputable. My understanding is that this wasn't that big of a deal. The native children often were naked until adulthood or late teens. Well, that part I get. The entertain white colonists with her nude cartwheels is the creepy part. Bunch of European guys, wearing their culture girls that age wore clothes, asking to be entertained by a naked Pocahontas. Something's fishy there. Rasputin convinced tons of women to sleep with him using religion, claiming that forgiveness was the highest grace and that unless you sinned, you could not be forgiven. Not only religion. He has quite an impressive dick, thought to be 30 centimeters long, 11 inches or even longer, and its thickness was compared to men's wrist. Also, apparently he never, or almost never, took showers. So there was a Victorian sexual purity activist who was staunchly anti-masturbation, unsurprisingly. Descriptions of masturbation in general society at the time were so broad and so couched in euphemism that one day she found out that she'd actually been masturbating for years without knowing that that's what she'd been doing. James Joyce wrote a ton of super dirty love letters to his then partner/future wife. I mean, you had an ass full of farts that night, darling, and I fucked them out of you, big fat fellows, long windy ones, quick little merry cracks and a lot of tiny little naughty farties ending in a long gush from your hole. It is wonderful to fuck a farting woman when every fuck drives one out of her. I think I would know Nora's fart anywhere. I think I could pick hers out in a room full of farting women. It is a rather girlish noise, not like the wet windy fart which I imagine fat wives have. It is sudden and dry and dirty like what a bold girl would let off in fun in a school dormitory at night. I hope Nora will let off no end of her farts in my face so that I may know their smell also. Turns out Anne Frank talks a lot about masturbation in her diary. Here is an excerpt of NSFW part of the diary that was cut out. Until I was 11 or 12, I didn't realize there was a second set of labia on the inside, since you couldn't see them. What's even more fun is that I thought urine came out of the clitoris. When you're standing up, all you see from the front is hair. Between your legs there are two soft, cushion-y things, also covered with hair, which press together when you're standing, so you can't see what's inside. They separate when you sit down and they're very red and quite fleshy on the inside. In the upper part, between the outer labia, there's a fold of skin that, on second thought, looks like a kind of blister. That's the clitoris.